First of all, it's nice to be back here in Plattsburgh. It brings back good memories, and I enjoy getting all over the state, which is a beautiful state, a very diverse state. And our morning started today at my house in Westchester. We were in Albany. We're here now in Plattsburgh, and making the rounds. And one thing that I've always heard continuously since 2014 when I ran is that the state is getting worse and worse. People are leaving because they can't afford it. They're leaving because there are opportunities in other places, and they don't want to leave. You know, how many people already have fled this state? Over 1 million. How many people have one foot out the door? Probably at least 1 million, if not more. And that has to be stopped. It can be stopped. You know, places like the North Country can thrive if they have actually a partner in Albany as opposed to an enemy in Albany. This should not be reliant on what some assembly people from New York City dictate to what happens here in Clinton County or Essex or anywhere in the North Country. You have your unique economy. You thrive with Canada. You thrive with Vermont. You thrive with folks up here. And there's no reason that you shouldn't be let alone to do what you need to do and to bring new industry in. But that they're not going to come if we have basically a recalcitrant and backwards thinking and penalizing Albany. And that's what we've had. So, we unfortunately are in dead last in all the wrong categories, in economic outlook and job losses and people leaving this state. Our budget is so bloated, and unfortunately, to feed the beast, they keep having to add taxes, which they do. That chases more people away, and we just continue that death spiral. So I ran in 2014. We gave Cuomo the race of his life. We came relatively close, much closer than anyone before or since. And you know what? We're ready to win this time. It is there to win. The political climate is going to be right. The issues are on our side. And we're going to have a very bold agenda on how to make this state great again and how to get it off of its knees and back on its feet. And it's not just New York City that's going to drive the engine here. Upstate can and should be an engine, economic engine of its own. And we're going to come out with a Marshall Plan for Upstate because I think New York is worth investing in, Upstate is worth investing in, and you should, in some ways, control your own destiny. You shouldn't be held hostage to what the assembly members and state senators from Albany or New York City say. So I've done it. Westchester County, just so you know, it's obviously a very big county. It's 1 million people. It's extraordinarily diverse. It is 25% Hispanic. It's the 8th largest Jewish county in America. It's 15% African American, a large immigrant population. And it's 2-to-1 Democrat, now 3-to-1 Democrat. And I've won in Westchester twice by 13 points because we were able to bring in mainstream moderate Democrats. We were able to bring in and won the Hispanic vote twice. We won 25% of the black vote. That's how you're going to win New York State as a whole, because Westchester is very similar in its demographics to New York State. And if I can win in a big county like Westchester, I can win throughout New York. And we're going to be very bold in our initiatives. We're going to focus like a laser beam on the economy, which includes taxes and regulations, which are just killing our small businesses, killing our big businesses, and just driving people out. Our tax rates have to come down, and they will, across the board in a real substantial way. You can't just nibble around the edges and pretend that's going to make things better. It's not. So what I did in Westchester, the highest tax county in America, we made sure for all 8 years that I was there that we never once raised taxes. In fact, we cut property taxes. When I came in, the budget was $1.8 billion. 8 years later, when I left, it was $1.8 billion. So we were disciplined, and we focused on job creation, keeping businesses there, and helping small businesses grow, and it worked. We had 44,000 new jobs created in Westchester in my 8 years. So that's going to be number one, the economy. Number two, and maybe no in particular order, ethics. I don't think it, I hate to say this, but it may not be too long before Andrew Cuomo is going to be living near you here in Dannemora. probably not the place he should be, but the corruption is awful. And I called that out, by the way, in 2014. If you see the debate from 2014 on that stage in Buffalo, I challenged Governor Cuomo to raise his right hand, swear that he was not subpoenaed and not under investigation, and he refused to do it. And obviously we know with the Moreland Commission and everything else what he was up to, and it all came out after the election. He's going through issues that are going to be very difficult for him personally and politically. But unfortunately, his corruption affects us all, because those corrupt deals that they cut, we pay for them. The average taxpayer has to pay for his corrupt deals. So it's not just about him. But the ethics need to be cleaned up. Albany needs to be cleaned up. We need to have term limits statewide, and that's something I'll push. It's something we did in Westchester. Things like energy and the environment are also very important. Education is extraordinarily important. You know, you have SUNY Plattsburgh here. There's no reason why the SUNY schools shouldn't be working with our job creators here in Clinton County or in the North Country to match vocational skills with the jobs that we could be bringing in here or the jobs that are needed. Lots of things like charter schools and opportunities for an education investment tax credit where our parochial schools and our private schools can flourish, and people of all different economic means can actually have a choice of where to send their kid. And one thing we've seen during the shutdowns and the pandemic, you know, especially kids on the lower income levels, they've been devastated. You know, in good years, they've been shut out of their good schools, not allowed to get in. They're on waiting lists. In bad years like this, they've been shut out of even their bad schools, and they're falling behind. And we're going to end up paying that price as the years go forward. So there needs to be education reform in a big way. And I would say the last thing, too, is enough. Like, enough is enough with this nonsense going on in our world today, in our state today. Not just the corruption, but the riots, the looting, nobody respecting one another, the cancel culture, the wokeness gone crazy. People are afraid to talk. The divisiveness, where we're being divided by race and class. This is the way a country disintegrates. We've got to actually come together. And, you know, in Westchester, as I mentioned, it is an extraordinarily diverse county. Income, race, class, whatever you want to say. And yet, I was able to work with a Democratic county board the entire time, and we got things done. And I was able to win Westchester big twice because we brought people into the tent, into the conversation, and we included everybody. That's what we have to do in New York. It's not being done right now. You see what's happening in New York City, where crime is rampant. These no-cash bail laws have to be revoked. You know, it's going to happen everywhere. It is already happening everywhere, where criminals are being arrested. They're being treated like martyrs. They're being treated like, as a victim should be treated, not as the criminal should be treated. And they're being let right back on the streets. These things, and not to say we can't have criminal justice reform, we should, but we've gone overboard in this state, and we've got to bring it back. So I'm running to bring balance back to this state, really. I mean, we need an adult in the room. We need somebody who has had an executive experience in a very large county running a complicated government, and sometimes we need a stop sign put up where enough is enough of all this lunacy. So let me take any questions you have.
Well, you just, you know, kind of finally said it. In all that you've been saying, you never actually came out and said, I'm officially running for governor until then.
You know what? Let me start for you by saying that. I'm here in Plattsburgh to announce that I'm officially running for governor of New York State, and I'm excited to do that. It is a great state. It is a big state. The North Country deserves better than what it's been getting out of Albany, and I'm in it to win it, and we will shock the world come next November.
You mentioned a lot about Governor Cuomo and
Yeah.
what's going on there. How vulnerable do you think Governor Cuomo is this election cycle?
Politically, he's extraordinarily vulnerable, there's no question, with all the corruption, with the federal investigations into the nursing home deaths and cover-up, into the Tappan Zee Bridge scandal, which is the Cuomo Bridge down in Westchester, Rockland, with clearly, you know, the whole COVID situation has been a failure. I think, in many ways, with the impeachment proceedings potentially, with the sexual harassment of over 10 women. So I think politically he's in peril. But it honestly doesn't matter to me whether it's Andrew Cuomo or just another Democrat that gets off the merry-go-round that's going to double down on the same bad policies that have put this state in the situation it's in. So I'm running as much against Andrew Cuomo as I am against the failed policies and the corruption of New York. And it can be fixed. I did it in Westchester, and I'll do it in New York.
You mentioned in 2014 there were similar concerns about corruption
Yeah.
and Andrew Cuomo, yet he still won. Do you worry at all that the electorate doesn't really pay attention to those sorts of scandals?
Well, if you remember in 14, we were harping about it, but it really didn't come to light till afterwards, the Moreland Commission, and clearly there was corruption and political corruption, not only with his official duties, as we're seeing, and I should add his book deal. I think that's going to be very problematic for him in keeping that secret, but also having state employees potentially work on government time to do his book. I think the corruption has just gotten worse and worse since 14. And if you remember, too, I mean, it wasn't just Democrats. The system has been corrupted by Republicans, too. If you remember, Dean Skelos, who is the majority leader in the Senate, Sheldon Silver. I mean, there's many more, some of whom are just getting out of jail. This corruption has been escalating through the years, not getting better. And, that's one reason why I think term limits is really important. It's not going to be the be-all and end-all, but it will at least bring in some fresh faces from both parties and fresh ideas, and not have somebody sit there for 35 years and grow moss all over them.
I have more questions, but
Yeah, I was wondering, you're obviously not alone, you're not the only GOP candidate to declare, so what makes you feel more qualified than the others who have also expressed?
I'll start by saying any Republican that runs is far more qualified and will be a better governor than Andrew Cuomo or whomever the Democrats put up. I think I'm the most qualified, especially as we go towards a general election, because I've governed. I've been an executive in a very large county. I've dealt with a deficit. I've dealt with taxes. I've dealt with a hepatitis A outbreak that we had in Westchester, so public health. And I've dealt with big issues that worked and built an economy. So I'm not afraid to take on people of both parties when I think they're wrong. And I did it in a bipartisan way, though, for my 8 years. I like to say the successes that I had were shared by Democrats in the other party because they were controlling the legislature. But I wasn't afraid to use my veto pen, too, when I had to put a stop sign up, like when they wanted to increase taxes, when they wanted to make Westchester a sanctuary county. And unfortunately, the last 4 years just got so hot politically that nobody could see straight. Seriously, I mean, you think about the last 4 years, love him or hate him, but Donald Trump was such a bright light that people, they couldn't see through the fog. And so it became so hyper partisan. And now, as people are waking up from that, especially in places like New York City and other areas, they're walking over homeless people. They're seeing graffiti everywhere. They're seeing businesses shuttered. People have for sale signs in every neighborhood, cashing out. People are looking for jobs or staying home because it's better to do so. That's not the New York I know, and it's not the New York that will be when I become governor. But people are opening their eyes to that now, and they didn't give it a thought really the last 4 years because it was all about Donald Trump in Washington, D.C., but we have major problems here at home that we're starting to see and we need to deal with.
And to just to build off of that, how do you see the Trump-Republican Party connection playing into your own campaign? And then also, how do you see that sitting in a New York that did not vote to re-elect him?
Honestly, the Trump factor is going to dissipate with time, and it will. And I say that because right now Democrats control everything everywhere. Washington, D.C., Albany, New York City, the suburbs, here in Plattsburgh. So it's it's a focus on what they're doing and what they're failing to do. And the problems are those that they own now. And they can scream Donald Trump to try to divert attention, but the average person's going to be like, all right, I either love him or hate him, but he's not there anymore. And who's going to make my life better? Who's going to actually fix these very broken problems that we have here? And that's what I did in Westchester, and that I think separates me in some respects from other candidates. That, I ran a very large county and dealt with very serious issues and had to make big decisions, which is what you have to do as governor. There's a difference between, I think, being in the legislative branch and being an executive branch. And I didn't serve time in Albany either, quite frankly, where I think it was kind of a get-along attitude, go along, get along, where things didn't get any better over the last decade. And unfortunately, I say that with Republicans having been in charge of the Senate, So I think we've got to tackle some big issues, but we've got to do it very differently and boldly.
So with the climate right now, will whoever the Republican nominee is have to pledge allegiance to Trump?
No, I don't think so. I think, look, I voted for Donald Trump. I did not vote for Joe Biden. I did not vote for Hillary Clinton, who lives about 10 minutes from my house. I think the policies of the Republican Party, and quite frankly, the policies of Donald Trump were far better than what the Democrats and the Nancy Pelosi's of the world have offered. I did not agree with Donald Trump on everything. I certainly have a very different style than Donald Trump, but I've also known him for a long, long time. He and his family have property in Westchester. They have businesses in Westchester. So I've known him, and I've known his family for a long time. But I'm me. I governed as Rob Astorino. I speak Spanish, so I say that because I do what Republicans don't ordinarily do. I go to areas where Republicans are politically uncomfortable going to, and there's no reason they should be. We should be going into urban areas and explaining why our policies are far better. We should go into areas and talk about why schools are broken and why parents need a choice to send their kids to wherever they want to. We should go and talk about crime, and we should talk about taxes. And I hear the same thing no matter where I go. And I will do that again this time like I did last time and like I did for 8 years as county executive. It's why we had such political success in a very deep blue county. Perhaps, I think it's the second deepest blue county in all of New York outside of Tompkins and the 5 boroughs. So, I mean, to put it on a scale, Donald Trump lost Westchester by 37 points, and I've won it twice by 13.
She touched on the large number of Republicans interested in running for governor this year. Elise Stefanik was one of those.
Yeah.
But it looks like she's probably out of the running now.
She's going to have a big day tomorrow.
Yeah, she's got a big day.
Yeah.
Well, Cheney's big day tomorrow.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Cheney's
We're
big
not
day
quite
comes
sure
first.
when they're going to vote on Stefanik
Yeah.
quite yet. But how much of a factor do you think she will remain in the gubernatorial race? And the fact that she's probably not going to run now, how much did that lead to you deciding to announce?
It didn't. I was gearing up to running for the last couple of months, but I wanted to make sure things were in order. And quite frankly, I wanted to talk to donors. And they've all been on board, and they're excited. And then grassroots excitement. And I said, you know what? I believe in fixing the state. I've talked to Elise several times. We've been friends since we first met in 2014. When I was running for governor, she was running for Congress for the first time. So we spent a lot of time in the North Country in her district. I've talked to Lee. I've talked to Andrew Giuliani, who I've known a long time. We're all very friendly. We're not only in the same party, but we've worked together. We're friends. And like I said before, it doesn't matter which Republican is carrying the banner next November. It's going to be 100 times better than what we have right now in Albany. And I think, and I know, whoever wins, everyone else is going to support that candidate. And there are some differences between us. And I think a primary is going to be a good thing. I really do. it will keep a spotlight on all of us as candidates and the Republican Party and our policies and principles and what we're advocating to fix this state. Otherwise, quite frankly, it might go to sleep until next year, but this is going to create excitement. It's going to create a difference between what we're going to offer and the other candidates are going to offer, but also what we as Republicans are going to offer and what the Democrats stand for and what they've done to destroy this state.
And when it comes to COVID, you were critical of the governor's handling of COVID. Aside from the nursing home deaths, what else do you object to that the governor's done as far as his handling?
His subjective rules and regulations, which have destroyed small businesses, destroyed restaurants, and have us as a state far behind the national average and far behind other states who found the right balance between public health and the economy. We didn't. And I think his very subjective and rules and regulations, which were so confusing at times too. I mean, the rollout was botched. The idea of you've got to be a certain category, a certain age group in order to go get your vaccination, and then they were confused on how to sign up. And if you God forbid you gave a vaccine to somebody who wasn't in that group that he ordered, you'd be fined. We're so far behind the rest of the country, and it's all self-inflicted. It's all the policies coming out of his office, backed up by the legislature. Giving him complete and utter control, I think was smart for a short period of time when we were knee-deep in the unknown of COVID last March and April. But at some point, the legislature needed to take back their responsibilities, and they didn't. And one person with all that power is bound to not just make mistakes, but abuse his power, and he did.
With the restrictions being lifted now, do you fully support everyone getting vaccinated? Vaccination the key to New York continuing to reopen and things getting back to normal? Do you fully support everyone, including teenagers, school kids, getting vaccinated?
I don't support requiring teenagers, even college kids, to have to get vaccinated in order to open up schools. If you follow the science and follow the data, they're least likely, by far, to get very sick or die. Many of them probably have some sort of immunity anyway because they probably had it on campus. But I do think that's an individual decision. I would encourage people to get vaccinated. I think that is, from a public policy decision and public health, the right thing to do. But I'm not in favor of vaccine passports and requiring people to get vaccinated. I think that's really a decision that adults need to make. So I would encourage people, but certainly those that have underlying conditions, the elderly and those that we know are most susceptible to coronavirus, they should be on the front of the line and they should make sure they get vaccinated. Other people that are healthier and have either making their own decisions to not, I think that's their own decision to make. But I do encourage people to get it.
Last question for me, I swear.
Yeah, that's okay.
You guys, but the announcement yesterday, you don't agree with having every SUNY student
No.
being required to have a vaccination
No.
before they come back to campus?
I do not. I think that they are in a safe category. Most of the professors probably will have already been vaccinated. And why is it that the teachers and professors are not being required to get vaccinated?
They are.
I don't think they were.
I have a friend who's a college professor. He's
Required?
required to be tested
Well,
and vaccinated.
I have not seen that as part of the order. But either way, that should be their choice. I do not think that a young child or a young college student should be required to get it. I think that's something that person should, well, certainly if it's a minor, the parents should have to make that decision in consultation with their doctors. And a young adult who is in the least risk category shouldn't have to get it if he or she does not want to.
Continuing on the vaccination range, a lot of the scientists or whatever are saying that the more people that are vaccinated, the sooner and the closer we get to what's called herd immunity.
Herd immunity, yeah.
what do you think of that concept of herd immunity then?
We're getting there anyway, honestly. And, nobody can tell us what herd immunity is, what percentage of the population. I've heard so many different things. This is like many other viruses. It will go through the system. It will go through. I mean, look at how many countries or states had hard lockdowns. In the end, it basically all equalizes, right? But some states that had hard lockdowns and shut their economy, they are very far behind. And New York is one of them. Other states that had that balance between public health and the economy, a Florida, a Texas, unfortunately became political on the national scene. But you cannot deny that they're in a much better position today than we are in New York.
We're talking a lot about the vaccination situation right now.
Mm-hmm.
How big an issue do you think it will be by the time the election day rolls
Honestly,
around?
I think next year, I think by this fall, a lot of things are going to be kind of back to normal. And by next year at this time, I mean, if we're still dealing with vaccination requirements and, a public health emergency, then something's gone really wrong. But I think for the most part, even with the variants, they're saying, the vaccines work, and it's like any virus, it will start to diminish with time, and we're already seeing that. So I think we're in a very different time frame, and public health crisis has passed. Now we're dealing with it, but we also know a lot more than we did a year ago. And unfortunately, some people are still using the same playbook from a year ago.
Could I follow up on the Marshall Plan? You talked about
Sure.
the Marshall Plan for the North Country. Could you give us some idea of what industries would be targeted or what you're looking at to try to rejuvenate the economy?
Yeah, I will at some point be back here to talk about specifically for the Marshall Plan for Upstate. But let me start with the basics that we're already doing wrong that will have a very big effect on places like Plattsburgh in particular, or the North Country counties. I mentioned about taxes and regulation. It is stifling right now for any small business to try to make it through the cacophony of regulatory agencies that bombard them day and night. I mean, I've talked to farmers in the ag industry. I've talked to small businesses. They are up to their nostrils in dealing with accountants and lawyers and consultants and lobbyists just to survive. But that means they're not making a profit anymore. That means they're not being able to hire people. The $15 minimum wage in places like this are going to be very detrimental to small businesses. So I think some things that sound really good on paper have the reverse effect. We're seeing that in New York. We're seeing that in places like the North Country, which has so many opportunities because natural resources, beauty, tourism, small businesses, manufacturing that can come back here. But why would manufacturing come back here if energy prices are through the roof? Why would manufacturing come back here if labor costs are through the roof? They won't unless New York does things to fundamentally change the way we do business. And the attitude that we have now and the policies that we have now are not inviting. In fact, they're doing just the opposite. They're chasing people away. So I know it's talked about a lot, but it actually has to be done. You have to actually change the culture, but you have to change the policies and the tax across the board. Corporate taxes affect small businesses. Individual income taxes affect small businesses. Labor costs affect small businesses. Energy costs affect small businesses. You're given a chance to come here, or let's say go to Vermont. Sometimes the choice is easy. You don't want to make that choice if you live in New York. You want to stay here. I'm sorry. Look, it's an energy truck. It's See? Energy's coming here already. Look what we're doing.
Right. So in the North Country, obviously the border is a very
Yeah.
important part of our fabric, economically, culturally. So what do you want to see happen there with regard to, a return to normalcy? And what do you think New York State can do to kind of capitalize on when the border finally does reopen, as far as encouraging that relationship coming back?
Yeah, the border should be open. I mean, we need free trade, free travel, easy access. You know, don't make it hard for people to have to, you know, go across a bridge or go across a border. You know, Canada is a huge influence on us here. It's a big trading partner. It's how we do business up here, and that's got to remain open. And so too do relations with Canada. I mean, on a national level, and as New York, as governor, I would be meeting with the premier, and I would be meeting with the prime minister to make sure that they realize that we want to do business together, that we are best of friends. There's a lot of different ways you can do that, but sending a signal is just as important as some of the policies, and spending time here and inviting those to come across the border with their Canadian dollars or with, you know, their money is important.
Also up here, big issues, you know, we've got the Adirondack Park, a lot of environmental issues, but
Yep.
also development within the park,
Yeah.
which has to remain constrained because of constitutional issues. What's your approach towards the Adirondack?
Same as my approach was in Westchester with some open space. We added open space, we protected open space, but we also, there was developable land in the county where you could find that balance between economic growth and development and also protecting natural resources. We did it there, and I think that's a fine line, but you have to be, you can't be so out of whack and stiff that you never have any economic growth because there's some green space. You have to have, I think, a very fine line and be able to have a balanced approach to that, as opposed to complete an overdevelopment or no development at all. I don't think those are the right choices. I think you can find a right balance to be able to have some development, but also to protect. The Adirondacks can be a huge source to draw people upstate from lower New York to come up here for, you know, the beauty that it is here. And if they're driving up the thruway to go to Montreal, can you please get off one of the exits and spend time here? I think that's a big attraction. I think it could be.
Does it have the right balance right now?
I think so, but I do think, again, if there are proposals that come forward, whether it's at City Hall or to the state, I think they should all be looked at individually. Some make sense and some won't. I mean, you know, you're not going to put a 40-story building and a massive complex in the middle of the Adirondacks, but you can do things with recreation. You can do things with tourism. You know, we've got the Great Mountains, but let's get a lot of people here too.
What about cell towers? That's controversial.
Oh my God, let me tell you, we need cell towers. I do think we need cell towers because, you know, coming up here, I'm talking on the phone and all of a sudden the phone is dead. But that also, you know, for broadband, for cell towers, I mean, if you're going to grow businesses and do trade and commerce, you also need to have communications. So I do think that that's important. And that can be done the right way, that could be done aesthetically, and again, it shouldn't be an all or nothing.